Hi, I'm Allie McDonald. I'm an assistant editor at O'Reilly Media, and I'm here today talking with Ray Villalobos, who is a speaker, developer, and author at lynda.com. And I'm also speaking with Jen Kramer, who is also a lynda.com author. She's also a speaker, trainer, and teaches at Harvard Extension School. So thank you guys for joining me today. So I know both of you work with, training on different web development tools, with Bootstrap and Node and Express. So I'm just wondering, why would people want to use these kind of tools, and what do you find most useful with them?
Tools are a really big part of the workflow that people use to develop things, and it's really important to get comfortable with whatever you're using. Whether it's Bootstrap or whatever editor you're using. A lot of people try to focus on specific things, but I think for the most part, it's about what you enjoy using, whether it's Bootstrap, any other framework, whether it's Node and Express, but just learning how to be really awesome at it and focusing some time so that you know the tools really well, so you can get your work done. To me, it's always all about the work. What do you need to get done? And then find the tools that you feel comfortable with and get really good at them.
Mm-hmm. And I think Bootstrap is really a productivity tool. So when I teach students how to use Bootstrap, I always teach them HTML and CSS first. And then we transition into things like Bootstrap as a faster and more streamlined way for building sites built in a responsive design. And so Bootstrap is just like any other tool, has its place, and it's not everywhere, and it's not every application. Bootstrap tends to be really popular with people who don't have a lot of deep graphic design skills, who just need to make a front end that looks relatively good. They want to make it really quickly. So I tend to speak at a lot of PHP conferences for whatever reason. So PHP developers really love Bootstrap.
But I think you make a good point that it's really, you need to have a good foundation whenever you use anything. So in the same way, I also teach at community college, and I try to make sure that I do the same thing that she does, which is start with the core, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and then go from there. You're going to need something at some point in the back end. So whether it's PHP, Node, whatever you're using, you just need to get comfortable with them and make sure you go from there, but you have a good background, because you almost don't appreciate Bootstrap until you've had to do a lot of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you run into compatibility problems with old browsers. It just makes it nicer, and it's sort of like when you first start to work and you see how much money it gets taken out of your check, for insurance or whatever. That's when you really appreciate your parents and everything they did for you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, as the old saying goes, fast, cheap, good, pick two.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to build a website that's fast and cheap, Bootstrap is a great choice for that.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of people gravitate towards it because it is really responsive. It sounds like it's something that's quick, and you can get in there and get what you need and really build a site quickly. And that seems to be such a important thing for people nowadays who not necessarily, like you said, might not have the background in back-end programming, but they want to have a website, or they have a business. So I think that sounds like a really good tool. So in terms of responsiveness, that's become a really important issue in web development. So how, what tools are you guys using for that, and how are you teaching people about building more responsive websites?
So Bootstrap is actually a great tool because it does handle most of that for you. I like using Sass and Compass with CSS just to make sure that I can do breakpoints and do really good responsive design. Some people stay away from Sass because it's a little more complicated, but it's also at the same time more flexible. I love starting sites with Bootstrap because they give you that foundation of getting something done. But a lot of times it may be sort of a little overkill. When you install Bootstrap, you get a lot of JavaScript, a lot of CSS that you may not need. So I think it's once you get maybe past that, I'm using this tool a lot, but I need to just develop something super simple, a simple application, then maybe you want to go explore other things and see maybe how you can use Bootstrap with less or Bootstrap with Sass to expand it, but then see how those other tools can help you be faster. To me, it's always about workflow, being faster, quicker, better, and being more efficient at doing whatever you're trying to do.
That's right.
Yeah, back in August last year, I had an article published in Smashing Magazine, which actually talked about how to teach HTML and CSS to new students who don't know anything about these technologies, in a world where we are very much focused on mobile and responsive design. So I feel like, in 2004, we used to teach people how to build sites with HTML, and they'd do their Hello World page, and then the next thing we wanted to do was make it red. And so we taught them the font tag, and we made it red. And then we said, after they've gone through a few classes, then they threw it all out. And we said, okay, now you're going to learn CSS. Don't do any of that font tag stuff anymore inside of your HTML. I feel like we're in the same place right now in the educational realm now, 10 years later, where we're teaching HTML and CSS, and we're teaching sort of broad page layout kind of stuff. And then we're like, okay, now throw that all out. We're going to teach responsive design. You need to learn how to build a grid system and all the rest of the stuff. So I've been struggling with how do you teach students thinking in a grid-based manner from the very beginning when they don't have any of these tools to think about HTML or CSS. And so some of the things that I've been addressing are thinking about your page as divided into 12 columns. Even if you don't have a grid system in place and you're just learning how floats work in CSS, that's a good way of at least starting. To at least accustom students to think about laying out pages in columns, to start asking, as an instructor, asking questions about how is somebody going to navigate this page with their fat finger, clicking on a mobile device, as opposed to a bunch of links that are all smushed together and can be navigated with a mouse, but not with a finger. So questions like that, I think, are things that we need to start asking as educators for these new students.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, building in this idea that, it's just not something that we need to reinvent the wheel every time we go to teach this. It's something that you can build in and sort of teach about responsiveness and UX and UI, as you're getting at the fundamentals. That sounds, really interesting.
Yeah, the tools change so quickly. I mean, it's really important to focus on what the fundamentals are and what you're trying to accomplish. Not so much on the specific tools, because just like you mentioned, the tools have changed so much just in the last couple of years. Node.js, for example, it's really huge now, but it wasn't really that popular, a few years ago, and not available just even a few years back. So to us, I think we try to focus maybe on concepts, like you said. Responsive design is a concept; it's not a tool, and so it doesn't, to me, really matter what you're using to achieve that tool, as long as it's something that you're comfortable with and that you can build to your needs.
I think the critique comes in with responsive design frameworks, comes in where people are using these as crutches. I don't really know how responsive design works. I don't really know how to build a grid. I need to get something to work on mobile. I'll just use Bootstrap. And the approach that Ray and I both take is you really do need to understand what responsive design is. You really do need to build your own grid system. And then Bootstrap can be this productivity tool. It can get you the work done quickly, as opposed to substituting for some piece of knowledge that you don't actually have.
Yeah, that's great. So, and Ray, you mentioned Node a little bit. So that seems like a technology that's gaining more and more momentum, and it seems like a lot of people are using different things, using Angular and Express and different things with Node, build web apps and build sites. So how are you, what have you been doing with Node?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is that it all relates, because Node is a way of doing something. Yeah. And Express is, I was talking about it yesterday, and it's really like a Bootstrap for Node.js, because Node.js is very low level. It's really good about networking and handling communication between browsers and clients, but it's really not something that you would want to build a website on, and that's what Express is for. It's a tool that allows you to create a framework that gives you a lot of functionality to be able to do websites on top of Node. So it allows you to create an MVC structure, which is Model View Controller, which allows you to separate your data from your program, from your templates. And just like with Bootstrap, it's just a productivity tool that sits on top of Node to accomplish what you want to do. And I think that's always, to me, the critical thing. What do you need to get done? Then find the right tool and then get good at it, because that's what you're going to be really working with. Don't worry about that it's PHP or Node or JavaScript. I think we get into a lot of discussions about what the right thing is. The right thing is the thing that does the job that you need to get done in the quickest, most effective manner. And whenever I think about learning something new, I always try to think about, is this tool going to make me faster, better, quicker, more efficient? Is it going to save me time? And if it does, then I take the time to learn it, because I know it's going to be an investment in the future. It might take me a few hours to at least get the basics of Bootstrap, but if that's going to save me 10 hours later on, then those hours that I'm spending are an investment. And so that's when you go attack some of these things. Same way, SAS, Compass, all those are ways of getting somewhere. And you need to get good at them if they're going to be productive for you.
Great. So, and I know you both, obviously, you train at all different levels, and working with different people who are new to programming and more advanced. So in terms of people wanting to get into web development, what advice would you have or tips and tricks? Obviously, we've talked about how quickly things change, but having been working in this space for quite a while and having the experience you do, what do you think are the most important tips for starting out in web development?
I think have a learning attitude is always really good. Just know that you're always going to be learning in this industry. You can never sort of stand still because the tools do change and they get better over time. I think we may be seeing more stabilization in some areas. You've seen the PHP frameworks go towards an MVC model that's really powerful because it gives you all this functionality without having to build a lot of the things yourself. So we're seeing stuff like Node and Express. We're seeing things like Bootstrap's up to version 3.0 now. And we're seeing all these things mature a little bit, but you got to get started somewhere, and you've got to have that a personality that attacks learning as much as possible. I think it's what makes the industry really fun. So you need to work on making sure that you are not going to learn something and that's going to be it, and I'm stuck with Bootstrap 2 and that's all I need to learn. You need to have that attitude that I need to be subscribing to good channels on YouTube, reading a lot of books. A lot of the stuff that I learn is just from reading, because if you want to get into like the more technical cutting edge stuff, it's all APIs that you have to read, or as manuals or books that you have to read or videos that you have to watch. So you've got to find those sources that are going to feed you and have that attitude that you're always going to get fed all the time.
So I've been working with Joomla, the open source content management system, since it was invented in 2005. And it's been interesting to watch the kinds of people who are coming into the web development field over all that time. So originally, there were a lot of people who had some kind of background, some kind of education and so forth. But then around the time the recession hit, there were a lot of people who started up in the business. It was more of, I'm unemployed, I need to make money, what can I do? Maybe I can build websites. Which I completely respect. And what people started to do was to download a lot of content management systems, figure out how to throw content into them, apply some kind of theme or template, and just start mass producing these websites. And I'm totally supportive of that. But they're now at a point where they really would like to expand their skills. And even though they understand one of these or several of these content management systems, they never actually learned HTML. Hand-coded HTML or hand-coded CSS. And so my advice to people is always to go back to at least those two fundamentals. And if you can throw JavaScript into, it's going to take you a really long way. But at least learn hand-coded HTML and CSS, because no matter what field you go into in web development, those skills are going to come back again and again. And you just can't progress any further if you don't actually understand that level of coding.
I would say too that you need to build your social skills. It's really, really important. Think about like the friend that you have that tells you what movies to watch, that you can trust. I mean, that person saves you so much time and so much money from watching really horrible stuff. I mean, I learned so much from people, even people that I go to watch that may already be doing something that I already know. Like I've learned so much from Jen and Bootstrap. Going to her courses, everywhere you go and every time you talk to somebody, you learn like some kind of like crazy tip that they're doing that you didn't know. Or you learn about their workflow and see what they're doing that's different, that's going to make you better. I always, when I'm watching videos, I'm always looking around the edges to see what little plugins they have installed, what applications they might be using. I love to watch the docs when they come up and I like freeze frame, okay, what are they using there? Because and be more social, you're going to talk to people and it's going to take you faster a lot of times than watching a video, and they're going to give you a lot of excellent advice, and they're going to possibly move you along in your career. People are really friendly in the web industry, so if you just go talk to them, they'll get you farther along. And I think that a lot of times, being an introvert myself, a lot of developers tend to be kind of like, let's just box in. You really need to work on that, especially as an introvert, because it's not natural to you. But it's going to be the thing that gets you jobs. My very first job in the web industry was I joined a club and I went to do things for the club. I built their website, and that company was a Tribune company who hired me eventually to do their newspaper website. So all those kind of connections have really helped me a lot. So be friendly, participate. If you're shy, what I always tell people is go to a meeting and volunteer to take photos. That way you can like chimp your camera when you're not doing something, like just watch the camera. You know, if you feel awkward, having something to do helps you a little bit. And so, you know, being social is such a huge part of this industry.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. It's all great advice. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.